woke up to knocking on my bedroom door. At first I thought it was part of a dream. I was asleep, and in the dream I remember hearing someone knock at a door. I went to answer it, and right before I got there, I heard the knock again. It sounded so real that it woke me up. I opened my eyes and looked around my room. It was dark, and for a few seconds I just laid there, half asleep, thinking about how real the dream had felt. This time it wasn't in the dream. Someone was knocking on my door. I looked across the dark room at it. It was closed. I was home alone that night. I don't remember the exact reason anymore, but I know nobody else was supposed to be in the house. That was the first thing that made me feel uneasy. If someone who lived there had come home, they would have said something. They would have called my name, opened the door, or at least made some kind of noise moving around the house. But everything outside my room was quiet. I waited, hoping I had misunderstood what I heard. A few seconds later, there was another knock. I sat up in bed. I didn't say anything right away. I just stared at the door and listened. I listened for any sound outside my room, footsteps, a voice, anything. But the hallway stayed quiet. After another few seconds, I called out, "Hello?" Nobody answered. That bothered me more than the knocking. If it had been someone I knew, they would have answered. Even if they were messing with me, they probably would have said something. But whoever was outside my door didn't say a word. I reached for my phone and checked the time. It was late. Too late for anyone to be stopping by casually. And even if someone had come over, they wouldn't have been knocking on my bedroom door from inside the house. Then it happened again. This time it sounded a little firmer. I called out again, louder. "Who is that?" Still nothing. That was when I started to get really scared. It wasn't the knocking by itself. It was the fact that whoever was out there could clearly hear me, but wouldn't answer. I sat there with my phone in my hand, trying to think of what to do. I didn't want to open the door. I didn't even want to get close to it. Then I heard the doorknob move. It was a small sound, but I knew exactly what it was. Someone was trying the door. I slid back against the wall and kept staring at the knob. It moved again. For whatever reason, I had locked my bedroom door that night. I didn't always do that, but with family in the house, it was something I did sometimes without thinking. That was probably the only reason he didn't get in. I remember looking around my room, trying to find something I could use if the door opened. Nothing felt useful. For a moment, the hallway went quiet again. I was still sitting there, barely moving, waiting for another knock. Then the whole door shook. I flinched and almost dropped my phone. Another hit came right after it. Whoever was out there had stopped knocking. Now they were hitting the door hard enough that I could hear it rattle in the frame. I yelled that I was calling the police. They didn't say anything back. They just kept hitting the door. I called 911. I don't remember everything I said, but I remember trying to explain it as fast as I could. I told the dispatcher I was home alone, someone was inside the house, and they were trying to get into my room. While I was talking, the banging stopped. That sudden silence scared me because I didn't know what he was going to do next. I told the dispatcher they had stopped, and she told me to stay in the room and keep the door locked. I wanted to listen to her, but I couldn't stop staring at the door. I kept expecting it to shake again. Instead, I heard footsteps moving away from my room. For a second, I felt relief. Then I realized they were still in the house. The footsteps moved farther away from my room, and at first I couldn't tell where they had gone. Then I heard drawers opening in the kitchen, one after another. I could hear him moving things around, like he was looking for something. I whispered to the dispatcher that he was in the kitchen now. I didn't know what he was looking for, and that was what scared me. After he had just tried to get into my room, I didn't want to stay there and find out. That was when staying in my room started to feel like a mistake. I looked toward my window. Until then, I had only been thinking about the bedroom door. I had been sitting there like the lock was my only option. But if the person in the house came back with something from the kitchen, I didn't want to still be in that room waiting for them. The window was the only way out. I moved as quietly as I could. Every sound felt too loud. I kept looking back at the door, expecting to hear footsteps coming down the hallway again. I opened the window slowly. It made more noise than I wanted, and I froze for a second. Nothing happened. I didn't hear anyone coming back, so I climbed out. It wasn't a huge drop, but I remember feeling clumsy and slow, like my body wasn't moving as fast as my mind wanted it to. Once I was outside, I ran to a neighbor's house down the street. I pounded on their door until someone answered, and I stayed there until the police arrived. When the officers searched the house, whoever had been inside was already gone. Nothing major was missing, and somehow that made it feel worse. If something had been stolen, at least there would have been an explanation. It could have been a robbery that went wrong. Later, the police found a cigarette butt in the hallway near my bedroom door. That detail stayed with me more than anything else. He had been outside my room long enough to smoke a cigarette while I was asleep on the other side of the door. I never found out what they were doing in the kitchen. I don't know what they were looking for, or if they heard me climbing out the window and left before they found it. No one was caught. For a long time after that, I couldn't sleep normally. Every small sound in the hallway woke me up. I started checking my window before bed, then the door, then the window again. The part I still think about most is how it started. At first, I thought the knocking was just part of a dream. Then I woke up to a real nightmare. I thought the dog was barking at something outside. That assumption is probably the only reason I stayed as calm as I did at the time. I was in my late teens when this happened, and that night I was home alone. My family had gone out of town, and my sister was working late, so it was just me and the dog in the house. I didn't mind being alone. I'd done it plenty of times before. The house was older and made noise at night, but I was used to it. After a while, you learn which sounds belong to the house and which ones don't. Having the dog there made me feel safer. He was the kind of dog that noticed things before anyone else did. If someone walked past the house, he would usually be the first one to react. There was a sliding glass door on the main floor that led outside, and that was where he usually went when something caught his attention. So when I heard him start barking that night, I didn't immediately think anything was wrong. I was down in my room in the basement. It was late, most of the house was dark, and I was either trying to fall asleep or already half asleep when the barking started. At first I stayed in bed and waited for him to stop, but he didn't. The barking kept going, and after a while it changed. It wasn't his usual quick barking at someone passing by. It sounded lower, more serious. That was when I sat up. I listened for a few seconds, thinking he would calm down on his own. When he didn't, I got out of bed and went upstairs to see what was going on. I didn't turn on all the lights, I just used my phone to see where I was going. When I got to the main floor, the dog was by the glass door, staring straight at it. I walked closer, expecting to see something outside. Instead, I saw that the door was open. It wasn't wide open, just cracked a few inches. I stopped when I saw it. For a second, I just stood there looking at the gap, trying to understand how it had happened. I was almost positive I had closed that door earlier. I was careful about that kind of thing, especially when I was home alone. I didn't leave doors open at night, but there it was, open just enough to feel the wind coming through. The dog looked at me, barked once, then turned back toward the opening. I looked through the glass, but it was too dark outside to see anything clearly. Mostly I could just see the reflection of the room behind me. I pushed the door shut and locked it. Then I checked it again to make sure the lock had actually caught. Once it was locked, I should have felt better. I didn't. Finding a door open in the middle of the night changes the way the whole house feels. A few minutes earlier, I had been annoyed that the dog woke me up. Now I was standing there wondering how long that door had been open. I stood there for a moment and listened. Nothing. I didn't hear anyone outside. I didn't see movement. The dog wasn't barking anymore, but he still seemed tense. So I started checking the house. I checked the main floor first, then upstairs. I looked in the rooms where someone could hide. I opened closets and checked behind doors. I didn't find anything. The whole time I kept trying to make it normal in my head. The latch could have failed. The wind could have caught it. But I really don't think I would have forgotten to close it all the way for that to happen. I wanted one of those explanations to feel right, but none of them did. After a while, I gave up looking. I had checked everywhere I could think of, and there was no one there. So I went back down to the basement. That was when the house started to bother me. Lying in bed after that felt completely different. Before, the noises upstairs were just old house noises. Now every sound made me stop and listen. At one point, I heard movement above me. I told myself it was the dog. That made sense. He was upstairs. He moved around at night, but the more I listened, the less sure I was. Some of the sounds were light, like his nails clicking across the floor. Other sounds were slower and heavier, not loud enough that I could say for sure they were footsteps, but close enough that I didn't want to keep listening. I remember lying there in the dark, staring up at the ceiling. I didn't want to go back upstairs. I had already checked the house once. If I went back up and found nothing, I would feel stupid. But if I went back up and did find someone, I had no idea what I would do. So I stayed in my room. Eventually, I put my earphones in and turned something on just loud enough to cover the sounds from upstairs. Looking back, it probably wasn't the smartest thing to do, but at the time, I just wanted to stop listening. Somehow, I fell asleep. Later that night, I woke up again. The dog was outside my bedroom door. That was strange. He usually didn't come down to the basement. There was even a gate near the top of the stairs because he wasn't really supposed to be down there. But now he was right outside my room, whining. When I started to open the door, he pushed through it and ran past me to the back of my room. He wasn't acting normal at all. He seemed nervous, like something had scared him and he didn't want to be upstairs. Around that same time, my sister got home from work. Hearing her come in made me feel better right away. I wasn't alone anymore. We let the dog out through the front door, then let him back in the same way. I remember talking with her for a little while, just normal late-night conversation. I didn't tell her about the glass door. Maybe I didn't want to worry her about what could be nothing. I don't really know why. I think by then I had talked myself out of it. I had already checked the house and didn't find anyone, so part of me wanted to believe there was nothing worth mentioning. A few days passed, and I mostly pushed it out of my mind. Then one night, it came up while some of us were sitting around trying to pick a movie. I mentioned it casually, like it was just a weird thing the dog had done. I told them he had been barking at the glass door, and when I went upstairs, I found it open a few inches. My sister got quiet. Then she told me something I didn't know. That same night after she got home from work, she had found the same glass door open too. I asked her what she meant. She said later that night, after getting settled in her room upstairs, she had gone back down to the main floor to get a drink. That was when she noticed the glass door was open again. Only this time, it wasn't just cracked. It was open wider. That didn't make any sense. I had closed that door completely. I had locked it, then checked it again before going back downstairs to the basement. And when my sister came home, we let the dog out through the front door, not the glass door. For a minute, we tried to talk ourselves into a normal explanation, but nothing made sense. There was one part I couldn't get past. I had locked it from the inside. So if that door opened again later, someone would have had to open it from inside the house. That thought made me feel sick. Up until then, I had been telling myself the dog was barking at someone outside. But after my sister told me the door had opened again, that explanation didn't feel right anymore. Looking back, I don't think the dog was reacting to someone outside the glass door. I think he may have been reacting to someone who had already made it in. When I went upstairs that first time, I may not have locked someone out. I may have locked them in. And if that's true, then they were somewhere in the house while I was searching for them. They would have heard me opening doors, checking closets, and walking past places I thought were empty. Then when I didn't find anyone, I went back downstairs. That's the part that still bothers me. If someone was hiding upstairs, they would have known where I went. They would have known I had stopped looking. I never found out what actually happened. Nothing was stolen. No one was ever found. But that door opened twice. Once before I locked it, and once after. I've never been able to explain that, because if someone really was inside that house, then for part of that night, I wasn't just hearing old house noises above me. I almost opened the front door that day, and I still think about what could have happened if I had. I was a teenager at the time, and being home alone didn't bother me. Honestly, I liked it. I had siblings that could get annoying, so having the house to myself for once felt like a break. I could watch whatever I wanted, eat what I wanted, and not have anyone bothering me. Nothing felt strange that day. I don't remember the exact time, but it was probably late afternoon. I was in the living room, and I don't remember what I was doing right before it happened. I just remember the house being quiet. For half a second, I just stood there. Then I walked over to the front door. I really didn't think much of it at first. I figured it was probably a neighbor, or someone selling something, or maybe someone had the wrong house. But I didn't just open the door. I looked through the peephole to see who it was. Nobody was there. I remember standing there for a second, confused. The doorbell had just rung, but from what I could see, the front of the house was empty. I really didn't know what to think at first. Maybe someone rang the bell and ran off, but something about it didn't feel right. It seemed too quick. Whoever rang the doorbell shouldn't have been able to disappear that fast, so I didn't open it. Next to the front door, there was a family room with a big window facing the front of the house. From there, I knew I could get a better view if I peeked through the blinds. I moved over to the window and slowly pulled the blinds apart just enough to look outside. At first, I didn't see anything. Then I looked near the square support post by the front door. There was a man standing behind it. He was pressed tightly against the side of the post, trying to keep himself hidden. His arms were straight down at his sides, and his body was pulled in close. His head was turned toward the door, like he was watching it and waiting. I remember he was wearing camo fatigue pants. For a second, I just stared at him. He had picked a spot where he couldn't be seen from the peephole. If I had opened the door, he would have been right there, close enough to push his way inside before I even knew what was happening. I knew right then that if I opened that door, something bad was going to happen. I didn't know exactly what, but I didn't need to. Everything about it felt wrong. I let the blinds go back as slowly and quietly as I could, then moved away from the window. I didn't call out to him. I didn't ask who he was. I didn't want him to know I had seen him, and I definitely didn't want him to know I was alone. That was probably the scariest part, knowing he was right outside, but also knowing I couldn't really do anything except stay quiet and wait. I knew the door was locked. I could see the deadbolt, but that didn't make me feel much better. The lock only helped as long as I didn't open the door myself, and that seemed to be exactly what he was waiting for. For a while, nothing happened. He didn't ring the doorbell again. He didn't knock. I didn't hear him say anything, and somehow that made it worse. Now he was just waiting for me to make the mistake of opening it. I don't know how long he stayed there. It probably wasn't as long as it felt, but at the time, it felt like forever. Eventually, I went back to the window and looked through the blinds again. The space behind the support post was empty. He was gone. But I still didn't feel safe. I didn't know if he had left completely, or if he had just moved somewhere I couldn't see. I never found out who he was. I don't know why he picked our house. I don't know if he knew I was home alone or if he was just hoping someone would answer. But I do know one thing. He was not standing there by accident. He rang the doorbell and hid beside the door for a reason. And the thing that still bothers me is how normal the whole thing almost was. If I had been careless, I might have done what most people do without thinking. I might have looked through the peephole, seen an empty porch, and opened the door to see who was there. But he wasn't gone. He was waiting in the one spot I couldn't see. Ever since then, I don't trust a peephole by itself. If someone rings the bell and I'm not expecting anyone, I check the sides. I look through a window if I can. I pay attention to the places someone could hide. Because when I was a teenager, I learned that an empty peephole doesn't always mean no one is there. Sometimes it means someone is hiding just out of view.